Item 9B, receive the 2017 Housing Element Annual Progress Report and authorize transmittal to the California Department of Housing and Community Development and Governor's Office of Planning and Research.
David, please.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. It's my pleasure this evening to present to you the city's 2017 Housing Element Annual Report and request authorization from the council to transmit this report, this document, to the California Department of Housing and Community Development and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. I'd like to start my report with some background. State law requires that cities and counties within California prepare housing elements as part of their comprehensive general plans. These housing elements are to describe local jurisdictions' plans, policies, and programs to facilitate the construction of needed housing within those jurisdictions. Local communities typically do not build housing, but they must zone sufficient land to accommodate needed housing within their jurisdictions, and otherwise come up with plans to make sure that they provide the framework or platform for housing production. Additionally, the California Housing and Community Development Department, HCD, through various regional planning agencies, establishes housing goals for the various jurisdictions within the state. These housing goals are referred to as the jurisdiction's Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. These housing goals are based on various factors, including the anticipated housing need in the local community, the ability of that community to meet that need, and proximity to major transportation facilities. The RHNA for the city of San Bruno for the current state housing element period, which is 2015 through 2023, is 1,155 dwelling units. 358 of these units fall into the very low income category. We're now about 3 years into this planning period. To date, San Bruno has produced about 113 total new housing units. 52 of these units are above moderate, 19 in the low income category, and the city to date has not produced any units in the very low income category. The established household income limits for the various categories are as follows for a 4-person household. Very low is up to 50% of area median income. A low-income household is up to 80% of area median income. Moderate is up to 120%, that's 80 to 120%. And above moderate is over 120% of area median income. And to give you an idea of what that means for San Mateo County, I'll cite 2 categories. The very low-income category, again, up to 50% of area median income. For a family of 4 would be $65,800 of total household income. And in the low-income category, for a family of 4, between 50 and up to 80%, the max is $105,350 total household income. HCD monitors the progress of various jurisdictions to achieve their assigned RHNAs based on the implementation of the jurisdiction's adopted housing elements, plans, policies, and programs. This monitoring is accomplished by reviewing the jurisdiction's mandated annual progress report, or APR. This APR is submitted by April 1 of each year to HCD and the State Office of Planning and Research. The state requires that this report be presented to the agency's legislative body at a public meeting where the report can be discussed and public comments can be reviewed and received. That, in essence, is the purpose of tonight's agenda item. The APR evaluates the jurisdiction's past year's progress toward implementing the jurisdiction's adopted housing element, in this case, the year 2017. Staff has prepared a detailed APR, which is attached to the staff report that you have before you tonight, for your review, discussion, and to receive comments. I'd like to provide some general highlights of our accomplishments, San Bruno's accomplishments this past year. In terms of housing production, the housing production I would characterize as low. We saw a total of 15 residential permits this past year of 2017, 14 of which were ADUs, accessory dwelling units. It's common throughout the state with the passage of state laws to encourage accessory dwelling units that many jurisdictions are finding a large number of ADUs as a part of the overall production. As I indicate, though, that our production this past year was low, I want to point out to you that in terms of what's in the pipeline, as many of you know, we have a large number of residential and mixed-use projects in the pipeline, and we are talking about an 8-year planning period. So as we look forward, we expect a large amount of production, housing production. In 2017, we received and processed the Skyline College residential project. That project was actually approved in March of 2018, but received in 2017, processed during that time frame, and that's going to result in 70 housing units, 40 market rate, 30 affordable units to faculty and staff at Skyline College. During this past year, the Transit Corridors Plan implementation continued. Construction is underway on the 83-unit Plaza mixed-use project on San Mateo Avenue. We've received applications and we're processing, as example of what's in the pipeline, approximately 470 new residential units. The projects are identified collectively as 111 San Bruno Avenue, the Mills Park redevelopment project, that is Mills Park Center, and an infill project at 500 Sylvan. We continue work on our zoning code update. This is an important project, and I'll come back to it a little bit later. It's important, very important, that we make progress on this project and complete it. This past year, the City Council approved an affordable housing impact fee, which will enable, over time, the City of San Bruno to collect millions of dollars to put aside for preservation and construction and support generally of affordable housing within our community. Currently, we have an affordable housing fund with a balance of about $3.5 million. The Skyline College project, the Skyline Residential Project, will contribute another $320,000 to that fund. This past year, as we continue to do, we monitor the project at the Crossing. At the Crossing, the city approved 325 affordable rental units in the past, and we continue to work with those property managers at that development to ensure that 97 very low-income units are available at Avalon Bay, and 228 extremely low, very low, and low-income units are available at the Village Center Apartments. The City of San Bruno also, this past year, and as it has done, continues to support organizations that provide for affordable housing within our community and the broader region. San Bruno contributed $30,000 to the Human Investment Project, otherwise known as HIP, and also $7,500 this past year to the Shelter Network. Let's say collectively, the City of San Bruno has done well this past year, and I think we need to look at the fact that this is an overall 8-year planning period. I'd like to point out, though, that we need to be thinking about housing production and our accomplishments to date and what we need to do as we move forward in the context of a regional and statewide housing crisis. That crisis is characterized by the following. The majority of renters pay more than 30% of their income toward rent. And nearly 1/3 spend more than 50% of their income on rent. California's home ownership rates are at the lowest level since the 1940s. Housing starts statewide are substantially lower than before the Great Recession of 2007-2009. As an example, in 2015, statewide, we saw about 80,000 units under construction as compared to 2004, where we saw over 200,000. Generally speaking, we're producing housing at a level of about 100,000 units per year or more, less than before the Great Recession. I should point out also that, as we're well aware, we lost statewide $5 billion statewide in redevelopment agency funds with the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies in 2011-2012, and federal funds for affordable housing since 2003 have been reduced by over 50%. As a result of this crisis, Governor Brown and the legislators in 2017 discussed what could be done to identify more funding, assure a more streamlined process for housing, and to ensure local accountability. Legislators put forth over 130 bills for discussion at the state capitol in 2017. Ultimately, 15 of those bills went forward and were signed by Governor Brown. The objective: identify funding, ensure streamlining, and ensure local accountability. Some highlights of some of the actions taken by our governor and state legislators are as follows. SB 2, known as Building Homes and Jobs Act, puts in place a recording fee for specified real estate documents, which will generate hundreds of millions of dollars over time for the planning of housing, the assistance to individuals experiencing or in danger of experiencing homelessness, and for the preservation and construction of housing. That's SB 2. SB 3, also known as the Veterans and Affordable Housing Bond Act of 2018, places a $4 billion general obligation bond on the November 2018 ballot to fund affordable housing programs and for the Veterans Homeownership Program, also known as CalVet. Additionally, Senator Wiener put forward, and it was approved by Governor Brown, SB 35. SB 35 is quite important, I think, for this community, this jurisdiction. SB 35 streamlines multifamily housing projects. I talked earlier in this presentation about the RHNAs. The state is looking at the regional housing needs allocations assigned to local jurisdictions, and what many jurisdictions have discussed in the past as making a good faith effort to achieve those goals, but oftentimes falling short, oftentimes woefully short. The legislature and the governor are putting teeth behind good faith effort, and we expect that to continue. What is the essence of SB 35? SB 35 streamlines multifamily housing project approvals. in jurisdictions where jurisdictions fall short of meeting their assigned RENA goals. And they have to do that for certain periods of time. In the circumstance that a local jurisdiction qualifies as what I'll refer to as an SB 35 city, approval of a qualifying housing development will be ministerial, without CEQA, without a public hearing process. That project will need to comply with existing design standards and zoning standards, but otherwise is ministerial and by right. Additionally, with SB 35, a qualifying project in a qualifying city for SB 35, if that project is within a half-mile radius of public transit or is in an area where a street parking permit is required but not offered to the occupants of that development, or where there is a car share within 1 block of the development, no parking is required for that project. And in any case, only 1 parking space per unit can be required of all qualifying SB 35 projects. My point with this additional information is to indicate that in terms of housing production and affordability goals, the state, the governor, the legislature, they're taking actions to force local communities to be more serious about their RENA goals and to not only increase the production of housing, but to make sure the production of housing is done in a way that addresses the affordability needs within the RENA assigned goals. What does that mean for our community? I talked earlier about the zoning code update. It's imperative, I believe, for us to go forward and complete that project. It's imperative that we demonstrate to HCD that indeed we have zoned lands that can meet our RENA goals. Again, local communities typically do not build housing, but they need to make sure that property is zoned to accommodate housing and to facilitate generally housing production, including the production of affordable units. I would say generally in terms of working with our development projects, we should look at opportunities to increase the number of units, ensure that there are components within those projects that are affordable, and that as we accumulate funds, we have about $3.5 million in existing funds, another $320,000 coming from the Skyline Residential Project, and with the adopted affordable housing impact fee, more funds to come, that as we collect those fees, we use those fees to preserve, construct, and support affordable housing within our community. With that, I think for this past period, 2017, the City of San Bruno has done a good job in terms of this past year. We have a great deal of opportunity in the pipeline to produce more housing, more affordable housing, and as we move forward toward the end of our period, again, 2015 to 2023, it's clear that the state is giving a mandate to local jurisdictions to take the RENA allocations seriously. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Questions, staff? Michael?
Thank you. One clarification. In the staff report, it specified that local jurisdictions are required to hold a hearing, but in your verbal statement you said only a presentation. So I just wanted to make sure it's not a public hearing that's required.
It's conduct of business in a situation like this, but you are required to take comments on the document if there's a desire to make comments.
Okay. So no formal public hearing.
Correct.
Okay. The other question was regarding the accessory dwelling units, and in the report it says they're considered to be affordable based on typical rents, but for most other affordable units, I think we would have specific legal requirements that they remain affordable, but in this case, we're not regulating them at all?
We don't have direct regulations on those units, that is correct, but in terms of categorizing those and looking at rents, we're presenting those to HCD as affordable units in the low-income category.
And they're not going to require us to verify that they are in fact?
We've checked with other jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
We belong to 21 Elements. Other jurisdictions are doing the same thing. We will submit the report and receive feedback. If the feedback from HCD is that we need to change the category, we will.
Okay. Yeah, because there's probably a potential for people to just create an Airbnb in their backyard. I don't want to get you started on Airbnb. But, I mean, the way it is right now, I guess we couldn't regulate that.
Not the way it's set up right now, no.
Okay. And the other thing, I know that the county is, they just started a program where they're allowing people with unwarranted accessory units to bring them up to code without any penalties. Have we looked at doing anything like that and possibly bringing some of those units into the fold if they're already out there and we just haven't counted them?
I think what we're finding is that with the 14 accessory dwelling unit applications that have come in and been approved, is that individuals that have, I'll refer to them as informal, accessory dwelling units are seeing the opportunity because of the current very low threshold in terms of requirements, in terms of parking fees. There isn't an extra service connection fee, for example. If you're within half mile of a bus stop or transit stop, you don't need to provide the additional parking. So the ordinance itself sets the threshold quite low, and we're actually seeing quite a large interest in people coming in and taking their informal, I'll use that word again, informal accessory dwelling units and getting them approved officially with what we have in place today.
Okay. So out of the 14, how many would you say were new construction versus ones that were
I
brought
would say
in informal?
nearly all of them were existing. I couldn't give you a specific count, but as I discussed with staff, these applications as they were coming in, most, I would say most, I'm going to say most, I'll leave it at most,
Okay.
were existing circumstances where people were coming in and legalizing those, I'll use that word, legalizing those conditions.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Clarification, what was that number again that you mentioned? How many applications have you been receiving on the accessory dwelling units?
I indicated 14. We had 14 approvals.
Okay.
Other questions from Council? Marty?
So we have 3.8 million plus or minus in our affordable housing fund, approximately, right?
We have 3.5
Plus
in
the other 300
and
coming
more
in.
to come.
Right.
Correct. Correct.
So what would be your recommendation? Do we have the staff to embark on finding a developer to start looking at to add these units? Is there a schedule on what would be your recommendation to the council on what we need to do to actually get something built? Should we wait till it gets to 5 million, or what's the long range plan?
Why don't I provide you some information, and I think it's one of those situations where there are options. First, one option is that as there are private development projects being proposed to the city where we would require inclusionary units in any case, and we see that it's very difficult to achieve very low income units, and that's true for all jurisdictions. The subsidy requirement is very large. One way, and there are options, one way to use those funds would be as we have a private development project that comes in and they're required to provide 15% of their units within the project to be affordable, typically at moderate and low, that some of those funds could be used to further subsidize, buy down, or further subsidize units within the project to achieve some very low income units. That's one option. Another option is to increase the number of affordable units within those development projects. Generally speaking, staff has come from the standpoint of when projects are located close to services and close to transit, it would be preferable from a staff standpoint to see the units included within those projects blended in terms of affordability levels, market rate, affordable, blended, when they're close to transit and services. When the projects are at a greater distance or a great distance from services or transit, that may be an opportunity to collect fees, an in lieu fee instead. So using those funds to have more units in a project blended or buy downs, further subsidized, is one option. Another option is to use that money or a portion of that money as seed money to cobble together to identify a site or sites for an affordable housing project. I should point out that typically with standalone affordable housing projects, there is truly a cobbling together of funding sources. Oftentimes, there may be 5 or more different funding sources. Land might be provided by, let's say, a jurisdiction. There may be tax credits. There may be state monies, federal monies. Oftentimes, with these affordable housing projects, there are multiple sources of funding or funds to make them happen. So that's something to be aware of. So those are some options. The option that's maybe most achievable is working with an existing private development project and essentially further subsidizing, having more affordable units within that project or subsidizing down to a lower income level. The more challenging would be looking at a site and then working with a nonprofit to cobble together typically 5 or more funding sources and acquiring the land. I hope that helps.
Anybody else have comments? David, do you need anything else from us on this topic?
I would appreciate it if you would see if there's any public comment on the matter.
I'd be more than happy to. As the director asks, is there anybody from the public who would like to speak on this topic? David, not at this time. We good? Next item, Vicki.